There is an old truth hidden inside many quiet lives. The person who carries the most is rarely the one who asks to be strong. Sometimes, the one who looks the calmest is the one holding back the flood. And sometimes, the person who seems the most loving is not simply loving. They are bracing, anticipating, preventing collapse before it happens. That is the strange sorrow of feeling responsible for everyone. From the outside, it can look noble, mature, generous, selfless. It can look like kindness with very clean edges. The one who remembers birthdays. The one who smooths conflict before it spreads. The one who checks on everybody, notices every shift in tone, and somehow senses trouble before it is spoken aloud. The one who becomes the bridge, the container, the emergency contact for every emotional storm. Watch people praise this kind of person. They call them dependable. They call them thoughtful. They call them the heart of the family, the glue of the friendship, the strong one in the relationship. But very few people stop to ask what it costs to become that person. Because responsibility in its healthiest form is love with boundaries. But in its wounded form, responsibility becomes fear wearing the mask of devotion. And that changes everything. The person who feels responsible for everyone is not always trying to help. Sometimes they are trying to prevent something, a conflict, a rejection, a disappointment, an explosion, a silence, a look on someone's face that reminds them in some old buried way that something is about to go wrong. That is why this pattern is so easy to misunderstand. Even the person living inside it may call it compassion. But compassion feels different. Compassion can stand near pain without becoming owned by it. Compassion can care without collapsing. Compassion can offer warmth without making itself the furnace for every cold room. What many people call responsibility is often something heavier, something older. A form of emotional vigilance that began so early it stopped feeling like fear and started feeling like identity. And once fear becomes identity, it is very hard to question. Because who are you if you are not the one who keeps everything from falling apart? Who are you if you are not needed? Who are you if you stop scanning, stop fixing, stop holding, stop absorbing? Some people learned very early that peace in the home was fragile. A parent's mood could shift the whole climate. A sigh could mean danger. A slammed door could mean a long night. A quiet dinner table could be more frightening than shouting, because silence often meant something worse was gathering in the walls. Children in environments like this become readers of weather. Not literal weather, human weather. They study faces the way sailors study clouds. They learn the difference between normal silence and dangerous silence. They learn when to joke, when to disappear, when to become useful, when to soothe, when to make themselves small, when to carry what no child should have to carry. And because children cannot leave emotionally unsafe worlds, they adapt to them. That adaptation can look like maturity. But it is not maturity, it is survival with good manners. That is one of the quietest tragedies in human psychology. Trauma is often rewarded when it is useful to others. The child who becomes hyper-aware is praised for being considerate. The child who asks for little is praised for being easy. The child who cares for siblings, comforts adults, manages tension, and never becomes the problem is praised for being so grown. But beneath that praise, something dangerous can begin to harden. The child starts to believe other people's emotions are partly mine to manage. Other people's disappointment is partly mine to prevent. Other people's comfort is my assignment. Other people's peace is my duty. And if something goes wrong, maybe I failed. That belief can follow a person into adulthood like a ghost that never announces itself. It enters friendships first. You become the one who listens for hours, even when your own chest is tired. You feel guilty for not replying fast enough. You can sense when someone is upset before they say a word, and your body reacts as if an alarm has gone off somewhere deep inside. A friend becomes distant, and your mind does not ask, what might they be going through? It asks, did I miss something? Did I do something wrong? What should I do to make it right? Even when nothing is your fault, your nervous system still volunteers for blame. That is what people often miss about this pattern. It is not only about helping, it is about preemptive guilt. The guilt arrives before the crime, the apology arrives before the accusation, the tension arrives before the actual problem. And because this happens so quickly, so automatically, it can feel like personality rather than conditioning. Then it enters love. And love becomes even more complicated because relationships naturally awaken the oldest parts of you. The part that wants closeness, the part that fears abandonment, the part that learned that affection can disappear when the atmosphere changes. So you start monitoring, softly, invisibly, constantly. You notice tone, delay, eye contact, energy, the length of a pause, the weight of a text message, the warmth or coldness in a goodbye. You become fluent in the smallest signals, but not because you are dramatic. Because your body has been trained to treat emotional shifts like incoming storms. So when someone you love becomes quiet, you do not simply observe it, you absorb it. You start working inside yourself like someone trying to stop a leak before the whole house floods. Maybe they are tired, maybe they are stressed, maybe they need space. But the body does not always believe in innocent explanations when it was raised around emotional unpredictability. It prepares, it tightens, it offers itself. Let me fix this. Let me explain. Let me soften the moment. Let me be easier to love. And little by little, love starts to turn into labor. Not loud labor, invisible labor. The kind no one counts because you make it look natural. You become the regulator of the emotional room. You become the one who thinks ahead for both people. You become the one who absorbs disappointment before it lands. You become the translator, mediator, comforter, excuse maker, emotional paramedic. And one day, without meaning to, you realize you are not only in the relationship, you are carrying it. That is when another feeling begins to grow beneath the kindness. Resentment. Not cruel resentment. Not selfish resentment. Exhausted resentment. The kind that forms when a person gives from fear for so long that their generosity loses oxygen. This resentment is confusing because it clashes with the image you have of yourself. You do not want to be bitter. You do not want to keep score. You do not want to feel irritated by the very people you love. But the human mind is not a bottomless well, and the heart cannot keep making deposits into places that only know how to withdraw. Soon, you may notice a strange contradiction inside yourself. You long to be appreciated but feel uncomfortable when seen. You want support but struggle to ask for it. You crave rest but feel guilty when resting. You want someone to take care of you but do not fully trust anyone to do it well. So even when help appears, you hover over it. Now you monitor it, you correct it, you stay half tense. Because somewhere inside, there is still a child who learned that safety is not something you receive. It is something you manufacture. That child becomes an adult who feels uneasy when things are too calm. Because calm means uncertainty. And uncertainty used to mean danger. So instead of resting in peace, you prepare for its disappearance. That is why people who feel responsible for everyone often struggle with a very private loneliness. They may be surrounded by people, needed by many, admired even, but still lonely. Because being needed is not the same as being known, and being relied on is not the same as being held. So much of their life becomes performance without intending to be, not false performance. Functional performance. They smile before the room notices their fatigue. They offer reassurance while swallowing their own confusion. They stay composed so no one else has to panic. They become skilled at emotional containment. But where does all that unspoken feeling go? It does not disappear. It turns inward, into tension, into fatigue that sleep cannot fully touch, into guilt that has no clear source, into a body that is always slightly braced, into tears that come suddenly and feel out of proportion, not because they are out of proportion, but because they belong to many moments, not just one. This is the hidden architecture of over-responsibility. It is built brick by brick from experiences that taught you one dangerous lesson. Love must be earned through usefulness, And if usefulness becomes the price of belonging, then rest starts to feel like selfishness. Needs start to feel embarrassing. Limits start to feel cruel. And saying no starts to feel like violence, even when it is gentle. So you keep saying yes. Yes to calls you do not have energy for. Yes to burdens that were never yours. Yes to smoothing conflicts you did not create. Yes to carrying emotional furniture through other people's internal houses while your own rooms slowly fill with dust. And because you do this quietly, people may not notice. In fact, some may come to expect it, not always maliciously. Human beings adjust quickly to what is consistently available. If you always absorb the tension, others may stop learning how to hold their own. If you always anticipate needs, others may stop naming them clearly. If you always overfunction, others may slowly underfunction around you. That is one of the cruel ironies of this pattern. The more capable you become at carrying everyone, the more everyone unconsciously hands you things. Then you look around and wonder why no one seems to see how heavy you are. But how could they fully see it when so much of your suffering has been disguised as competence? This is why many people who feel responsible for everyone do not break loudly. They erode. Like a shoreline touched by waves no one thinks are strong enough to matter. A little more each day, a little more each year. Until one day they no longer know what they feel, only what everyone else seems to need. And that loss is deeper than burnout, because burnout says, I am tired. But this goes further. It says, I am losing contact with the part of me that exists outside of service. That is a haunting place to live, and to become so practiced at reading others that you cannot read yourself. To know everyone's wounds but not your own hunger. To sense everyone's sadness but not notice how empty your own hands have become. Sometimes this pattern also hides a subtle illusion of control. Not arrogance, not vanity, just wounded control. If you stay responsible for everyone, maybe nothing terrible will happen. If you stay prepared, maybe chaos can be managed. If you keep people happy, maybe they will not leave. If you can predict every shift, soften every mood, and solve every discomfort, maybe love can be kept stable. But life does not work that way. People still misunderstand. People still withdraw. People still make choices from their own wounds. People still hurt each other. People still carry darkness that your devotion cannot dissolve. And when that reality appears, the over-responsible person often feels not only grief, but personal failure. As if they were supposed to stop the river from flooding with their bare hands. This is why they often feel drawn to people who are struggling. Not because they enjoy pain, because pain gives them a role. A clear one, a familiar one. To rescue, to steady, to interpret, to remain. Chaos feels strangely intimate when you were shaped inside it. You may not consciously seek wounded people, but you may feel deeply uncomfortable around people who ask little from you emotionally. Their stability can feel foreign. Their clarity can feel unsettling. Their ability to self-regulate can even make you wonder whether you matter to them at all. Because if someone does not need to be managed, soothed, saved, or carried, then how do you locate your worth inside the connection? This is where the pattern becomes especially heartbreaking. The very thing that once helped you survive can begin to block the kind of love you actually need. Because healthy love is not built on rescue. It is not built on endless emotional labor. It is not built on one person bleeding competence while the other bleeds dependence. Healthy love requires mutuality. And mutuality can feel almost suspicious to someone who learned that closeness is maintained through overgiving. So sometimes peace feels boring. Sometimes steadiness feels empty. Sometimes reciprocity feels unfamiliar enough to be mistaken for lack of intensity. But intensity and safety are not the same thing. They only become confused in people who had to earn calm by sacrificing themselves. Underneath all of this, there is often a childlike hope that never fully died. A hope that one day, if you are loving enough, careful enough, useful enough, someone will finally say, you do not have to do all of this here. Not because you demanded it, not because you explained it perfectly, but because they simply saw the effort, saw the scanning, saw the invisible labor, saw the ache behind the competence, saw how often your kindness was laced with fear. And maybe that is the deepest wound in people who feel responsible for everyone. Not only that they carry too much, but that they learn to carry it in silence. Because somewhere along the way, silence became part of the goodness. Needs became dangerous. Mess became shameful. Dependence became humiliating, so they learned to be admirable instead of honest, useful instead of soft, yet present instead of revealed. And the world rewards this more than it should. It calls them reliable while ignoring the cost. It benefits from their overextension and names it virtue. It leans on them and mistakes their endurance for endless capacity. But every human being has an edge. Every nervous system has a limit. Every heart, no matter how loving, has places inside it that begin to dry when they are only poured from and never poured into. Perhaps that is why the over-responsible person often feels strangely emotional at small acts of tenderness. A simple question, a patient pause, someone noticing they are tired before they have to hide it, someone saying, "You do not have to explain," someone carrying something without being asked, someone staying calm in the presence of their imperfection. To others, these moments may seem minor, and to them, they can feel almost unreal. Because when a person has spent years being the shelter, even one moment of being sheltered can feel like rain after drought. Still, the pattern does not dissolve just because kindness appears. It lives in the body now, in the reflex to apologize, in the urge to over-explain, in the instinct to monitor, in the guilt that rises when someone else is upset, even when you did not cause it, in the discomfort of receiving, in the habit of taking the emotional blame just to restore calm faster. And, perhaps most painfully, in the confusion that comes when you finally start to see the pattern clearly. Because then you are faced with an aching question. If so much of your identity has been built around carrying others, what remains when the carrying stops? Well, that question can feel like standing at the edge of an empty field after years of living in a crowded house. Too much space, too much quiet, too much unfamiliar freedom. And yet, beneath the fear, there is often grief. Grief for the younger self who became a caretaker too soon. Grief for the tenderness that was spent on everyone else before it was ever given a place to rest inside your own life. Grief for the years spent confusing hypervigilance with love. Grief for all the times your body said, "This is too much," and your identity answered, "Carry it anyway." That grief matters, because behind this pattern is not weakness. It is adaptation. Brilliant, painful adaptation. The psyche is always trying to protect itself, even when it chooses costly methods. And feeling responsible for everyone is one of those costly methods. It says, i.e., if I can hold enough, maybe I can finally be safe. But safety built on self-erasure is never truly safety. It is just tension made useful. And useful tension is still tension. What makes this psychology so difficult to name is that it is wrapped in goodness. There is real love in it, real sensitivity, real devotion, real empathy. That is why it hurts to examine. Because it does not feel like cruelty, it feels like care. But care that destroys the self is not pure care. It is care braided with fear, guilt, and old survival vows. Somewhere deep down, many people like this are still trying to prevent an ancient pain from happening again. A rejection, a collapse, a rage, a withdrawal of love. So they stay ready, ready to smooth, ready to fix, ready to carry, ready to become whatever the room needs before the room can turn dangerous. And perhaps no one told them that a life spent preempting disaster can become its own kind of disaster. A slow one, a respectable one, a quiet one, the kind that leaves no dramatic wreckage, only a person who can no longer remember what it feels like to exist without bracing. That is the silent cost. Not only exhaustion, not only resentment, but the fading of spontaneity, the fading of softness, the fading of the unguarded self that does not need to earn love by becoming useful. And still, even here, there is something deeply human. Because the person who feels responsible for everyone is not broken in some unusual way. They are revealing one of the oldest human hungers, the hunger to secure love, prevent pain, and matter enough to be kept. That hunger can take many forms. For some, it becomes achievement. For others, charm. For others, perfection. And for some, it becomes emotional caretaking. So, if this pattern feels familiar, perhaps the truth is not that you care too much. Perhaps the deeper truth is that somewhere in your story, caring became fused with survival, and that fusion has made your tenderness very heavy. Not because your heart is wrong, but because your heart has been carrying jobs it was never meant to perform alone. Maybe that is why people like this often look so composed while feeling so tired. They are not only living their own life, they are carrying 10 invisible versions of everyone else's, predicting them, soothing them, anticipating them, absorbing them, and no one sees all the emotional miles traveled inside a single ordinary day. So if you have ever felt guilty for being tired when, on paper, nothing seems dramatic, if you have ever felt burdened by people you genuinely love, if you have ever felt lonely in the middle of being needed, if you have ever mistaken your exhaustion for selfishness because you could not explain why everyone's feelings felt like they landed inside your body, then perhaps there's nothing cold or ungrateful in that. Perhaps it simply means your nervous system has been acting like a house with too many open doors. Anyone's weather can blow in, anyone's sadness can settle in the furniture, anyone's anger can shake the windows. And after enough years, even sunlight starts to feel like something you must manage. Still, there is something quietly sacred in finally naming the pattern. Not to condemn it, not to shame it, but to see it. And to understand that the need to hold everyone together did not come from nowhere. It came from somewhere. From old rooms, old silences, old fears, old bargains made by a younger self who deserved far gentler conditions than the ones they were given. And maybe that younger self was never asking to become strong. Maybe they were only asking for the room to stop shaking. That is a very different story, a more compassionate one, a truer one. So the next time you notice someone who seems endlessly dependable, endlessly composed, endlessly available, remember this. Some people become everyone's safe place because they never had one of their own. And sometimes the person carrying the lantern is standing in the dark,